Welcome to Proclaiming Justice, a podcast from PJTN that focuses the light of truth on vital issues in today's headlines that impact every American. I'm your host, Laurie Cardoza Moore, founder and president of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, and I'm here to educate, motivate, and activate you to action. I want to arm you with the truth and the facts you'll need to fight and preserve our constitutional republic and uphold the Judeo-Christian values our nation was founded upon. Welcome to Proclaiming Justice, a PJTN podcast, and I'm your host, Laurie Cardoza Moore. If you missed the last episode of this podcast, you will find it and our previous podcast lineup on our website at pjtn.org, as well as all the other platforms that you use to access your favorite podcasts. On this week's podcast, I have invited Rabbani Yaffah Batya Da Costa, founder and CEO of Ezra L'Anousim, back on the podcast to continue our conversation about what happened to the Jews of the Inquisition. Yaffah, thank you for joining us again on Proclaiming Justice.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Laurie. I really love doing this show. You're so great. You really are. You're terrific.
Oh, thank you. Well, I enjoy having you on the show. I always learn a wealth of information, and I know our audience does too. So very exciting, very exciting.
Yeah, and today's a very special day. I have a couple of quick announcements, and then we can go ahead with what you'd like to talk about. But today, May 18th, is so special, really, really so special. It's the inauguration of Pope Leo XIV at the Vatican, which happened, I think, already. And I understand from the news that J.D. Vance was planning to be there, and Marco Rubio, and the president of Israel, Mr. Herzog. So, yeah, amazing. And the other thing about this is that on May 8th, the new Pope Leo XIV, wrote a letter to the Rabbi Director of Interreligious Affairs at the AJC. I think he's in Chicago. And this man comes also from Chicago originally. And here's one of the things he said in the letter. So I'm going to quote him from the letter. It said to this rabbi, "Trusting in the assistance of the Almighty, I pledge to continue and strengthen the Church's dialogue and cooperation with the Jewish people in the spirit of the Second Vatican Council's Nostra Aetate." Unquote. If I said that correctly. Yeah, that to me is it.
That's amazing.
That's an amazing, wow. So, as I said, various people, I think there was a whole group of rabbis. I know at least one of them. I won't mention his name. I've known him for many years from my days with Daniel Jones. I'm pretty sure he probably went. He's gone to the Vatican quite a lot with interfaith relations, Jewish-Christian relations. And I know we both wish the Pope all the best with this inauguration and for his continued advocacy for peace and understanding between Christians and Jews. And Laurie, maybe we'll have an opportunity to work with some Vatican people, okay, who are involved with interfaith dialogue and Jewish-Christian relations. So it's kind of like in the works.
I think that might be a very real possibility. I'm amazed that he addressed that issue with the Second Vatican Council, because he obviously is sending a message to the Jewish community around the world that he recognizes the anti-Semitism that is so pervasive, and the fact that he wants to go back to the Second Vatican Council, to Nostra Aetate, to me is very significant.
This is a huge deal, or as President Trump would say, huge.
Yeah.
Okay. Exactly. I mean, it really is. It's a big deal. Yeah. Okay. Now, the other announcement I have very quickly, today, May 18th, is the beginning of a miracle in Lima, Peru. Today, right now, there are Orthodox rabbis on flights from 2 different countries on their way to Lima, Peru, to perform conversions to Judaism of people from the B'nai Anusim, 70 men, women, and children. And I'll explain later about help and support needed for what they're doing this week. They're doing the conversions tomorrow
Mm-hmm.
and Tuesday, and then remarrying the couples on Wednesday. And there's an interesting parallel, by the way, because Leo the 14th spent many years in Peru, I think about 15 years in Peru. So, but he wasn't missionizing to Jews, he was missionizing to the natives of Peru, okay, the native peoples. So, anyway, it's just all fascinating stuff all happening together.
Well, I'm working with a dear friend of mine who arranged for me to meet with Cardinal Koch back in 2014, I believe it was, at the Vatican to talk about hosting a major event globally. There would be global participants to come to the Vatican to again address the issue of Nostra Aetate and to try to encourage the Vatican to take the lead, because even back then in 2014 we were seeing the signs of anti-Semitism on the rise, and I felt like if there was ever a time, it was back then that we should start. We should get the encourage the Catholic Church to take the lead on the Christians, making the Christians aware of this threat and what our biblical duty should be in response to this threat. But unfortunately, the opportunity did not present itself at that time. So maybe this is the time. This is the hour.
With
God
God's
willing.
help. With God, absolutely,
Amen.
with God's help. Yes. Okay.
All right. Well, very good. Well, thank you for that information. Yes, further in the program, we're going to find out how people can get involved. But let's go ahead. And again, I want to just thank you for joining us. And of course, you know, Yaffah, I'm sure you were watching with bated breath this week the historic events that were unfolding in the Middle East as President Trump is trying to negotiate peace through his economic strategy. And the Middle East, as you know, has been rocked by terrorism for decades. And the battle is being waged over the land and who has legitimate rights to it. In fact, PJTN, we addressed this issue with our documentary back in 2017, educating Christians about, again, the biblical land rights. And the documentary, Israel Indivisible, The Case for the Ancient Homeland, makes the case historically, legally, biblically, and archaeologically as to why Israel has rights to her ancient homeland. So today we're going to talk about that archaeological evidence that you found that proves Israel's rights to her ancient homeland. So tell us about the recent fragments that were found in Egypt, which I find interesting, of all places, in Egypt, that proves Israel's ancient claims.
Well, so here's the thing. I just want to preface what we talk about today with the word tolerance. I think that's what's missing in various forms of religion, whether it be Christianity, also Judaism, also Islam, the major three, what are called monotheistic religions. It really is tolerance that's lacking. Okay, tolerance for difference, tolerance for people who have different views. And of course, that's what happened because of the Greco-Roman story and things that happened that we talked about in the last segment that we did. And because they were so, the Greco-Romans were so anti-Jewish, and that goes all the way back to the 3rd century BCE with a writer who wrote in Greek called Manetto. So I just want to remind people of that if they want to know more. You know, they can listen to our podcast from last week. But the thing is, what happened was, and we ended the program with this, what happened was at the end of the broadcast, I talked about the archaeological papyri and fragments that were found from the Gospel of John. And I mentioned that it was chapter 16. Okay. And I'm going to read verses 14, 15, and 16 and talk about what they discovered. I'm not going to mention the names of the people who did this research. Maybe in some future program I'll do that. but it's not my research. It's from research that was done by some Jewish people in Israel. Okay. So here are the verses in John chapter 6. And John is very late, by the way. John's gospel, or the Gospel of John, was written, the scholars, Christian scholars, think somewhere between 90 and 110. And so here are the three verses in John chapter 16. He, meaning God, he shall glorify me, for he shall receive of mine and shall show it unto you. So Jesus is talking to his disciples. Verse 15, all things that the Father has are mine. Therefore said I, that he, meaning God, shall take of mine and shall show it unto you. And then verse 16, a little while and you shall not see me, and again a little while and you shall see me, because I go to the Father. Okay, so he's like trying to prepare his followers, his disciples, his Talmudim, about what's going to happen. Now, the thing is, in this parchment, this little piece of papyri that was found at this cache of like 500,000 documents, manuscripts, and fragments, the one of John chapter 16 only has verse 14 and 16, and it's missing verse 15. Okay? It's not there. And that fragment is dated to the mid-2nd century. So what does it mean? Since God the Father has all glory, all power, all knowledge, all wisdom, insights, discernment, I mean, everything, he's all-knowing. If all those things that belong to the Father also belong to Jesus, then Jesus is equal to God the Father. And that's how that verse has been used by the or how it was used by the Greco-Romans during the time, almost 300 years later, when, we talked about this in the last program last week, when there was a controversy between Arius and Athanasius. Because Arius said that Jesus was not equal to the Father, okay, and Athanasius said he was equal to the Father, and that's where they came up with the idea of the triunity or triune God. God is one but has three persons in the Trinity, okay, right. Which, by the way, that term wasn't used until Tertullian, which was came later. So it's interesting because the verse was added right around the late 3rd century, early 4th century, right around the time of this controversy between these two people in Alexandria, Egypt. That's when the verse was added. How do we know it was added? Because, again, in the mid-2nd century papyri that was found, it's not there, but there's also Codex Sinaiticus parchments and papyri that were found in the same cache, okay, of this group of documents and fragments. And in the Codex Sinaiticus version, it is there 300 years later. So it was, yeah, it's clearly added. Okay, and this one verse, they put into the mouth of Jesus that he is deity, that he's equal to the Father. And then they use the verse as a proof text for the concept of the Trinity. Now that's called circular logic.
So you're saying this scripture, this verse that we're talking about in John, was added later. This was not part of the original writings.
That's correct. It was added later.
This is extremely important because most Christians don't know that there have been scriptures added to and taken away from, and that's why there is a verse in the scriptures that talks about not taking, adding. I think it's in the Torah, not adding or taking one word, one jot, one tittle. Nothing can be changed. So the fact that it wasn't written initially first, that causes us pause. And I always tell my students, our Bible study students, that if you can't back up what you find in New Testament scriptures, in the Torah, in the writings, in the prophets, then you need to take that verse and put it up on a shelf because there's a problem here. And we should be able, a matter is confirmed, the Bible is also very clear. A matter is confirmed in the Torah before a cloud of witnesses, 2 to 3 witnesses. So we have to have 2 or 3 witnesses that testify of a truth that is being communicated, especially in the New Testament scriptures. But this is important for Christians to know because most Christians don't realize that there are verses that are missing, and then there are verses that have been added to.
And there are verses that were changed also. So there's 3 categories of what was done to the first century writings. But the thing from my standpoint is, again, for people to believe that verse, even though it was added later, is not a problem for me. The problem is persecution of people who don't believe in that verse, or the persecution of the Jews who are strict Unitarians. And there are Christians, by the way, who are also Unitarians.
Right.
There are certain names for their groups and all this stuff. And, there's one group that's called the Unitarian Church. Okay, so these are Christians. The Trinitarian Christians probably wouldn't agree that they're Christians. Okay, because they think, that, and this is what they've been taught as well, that if people don't believe that Jesus is God, much less the Messiah, let's just deal with the God thing, then they're not only not Christian, but they're going to hell. And according to replacement theology, as you know so well, Laurie, God took them out of his divine plan. And there's no even plan for the Jews anymore. The Christians have replaced the Jews, as you know, the way it's taught. So this, for me, is the crux of the issue. Not what people believe, but having tolerance for people who believe differently, even among Christians, and of course, between Christians and Jews. And I hope that's what we're going to be able to do with people from the Vatican, is influence them, convince them, whatever we want to say, and other Christian groups as well, that this is the issue, that the anti-Semitism is incorrect, especially in the United States, by the way. Look at the Constitution of the United States and the First Amendment to the Constitution that talks about freedom of religion and freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Well, I have to tell you, Laurie, I think quite a long time ago we had a program about this. The 13 colonies, the people of the 13 colonies represented quite a diverse number of Christian sects, if you will, or Christian organizations, or whatever you want to call it, extremely diverse, okay? And the situation was that they used to fight with each other within each of the 13 colonies, because in each colony, a certain one of these groups would have predominance, and then they would fight with and criticize with and put down.
So nothing's changed. Is that what you're saying?
Nothing has changed, and that's why the founding fathers of America said, we don't want the government to ever claim that there's one religion or one version of Christianity, or whatever, however you want to say it, that's for everybody and is going to be forced on everybody, okay, because they knew what happened in the Roman period. And no, they said everybody has to have freedom of religion, and of course, including the Jews. So when those of us who know these things and understand the history, which is what a lot of people aren't taught, when we see these campus protests that are pro-Hamas and pro-terrorism and in favor of the slaughter of the Jewish people because of their beliefs, and by the way, there are people who don't think it's about the land at all. They think it's a religious dispute, that these jihadis, okay, are out to not only decimate Israel and kill all the Jews, they want to kill all the Christians as well. They want to kill everybody who's what they call a kafir, or an infidel. They're like the Greco-Romans wanting to kill everybody who just, okay, that's what it's about. It's not so much about the land. But that's another view of what you said earlier, that it's the land. So I just want to say one more thing, then we can continue. There's a song that's sung in a lot of Unitarian churches. A lot, maybe I don't know a lot, but in some of them. And I just want to give your audience the lyrics because it's a beautiful song. They can look up this song on the internet and actually see a video or hear it because the music is also beautiful. And here are the lyrics. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. With God as our Father, brothers all are we. Let me walk with my brother in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow. To take each moment and live, each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
Oh, I love that song. I remember singing it in choir going through elementary and middle school. Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you for reminding us. I'm sure our audience can relate to that song. They remember it. We remember it well. And yes, let it begin with me. So, you talked about these fragments, Yafa, and we know that most Christians are not aware of even the verses that have been added to or taken away from the scriptures. How many people in the Christian world do you think know about even these fragments? I mean, when would we have had access to them?
It didn't start. Maybe they've done it more since this date, but it didn't start until 2010. Now, they obviously didn't publish all 500,000.
How old are these fragments?
They were discovered between the late 1800s and the early 1900s, between 1896 and 1907 or something like that. So
you're
over
saying,
100 years.
Okay, so you're saying that these manuscripts, these fragments, have not been made available to us until 2010?
That's correct.
After 100 years?
Over 100 years.
Where have they been?
Well, the scholars have been looking at them. Look, there's 500,000 of them, and I don't know why they chose to publicize some of them. It's a small number, I'm sure. They are in 3 museums around the world. One is in the UK. They're in a museum, probably under glass, okay, the ones that got published. And then there are 2 other museums, and I forget the countries where those other 2 museums are. So they did publish some, and maybe they'll continue to publish some. Most of the Christian scholars who are into this and into, fragments and things that have been found from archaeology. By the way, one of the rabbis in Israel that I was talking to about this, and you know him as well, I just won't mention his name, he's the one who told me that Codex Sinaiticus, the cache of manuscripts and fragments and papyri that were found in Sinai, in the Sinai Desert, he told me that there are 30,000 significant discrepancies within those fragments and documents that were found in the Sinai. 30,000.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is not new to the scholars. The difficulty we have is that not too many people, as just regular Christians, including regular Jews for that matter, Muslims, whatever, very few regular people who don't have the background, who don't have the scholarship, who don't have the degrees, who aren't studying these things, know about it. Very few, very, very few. You and I, are a small, small, small minority, and you're, of course, even talking about it, even discussing these things, Very small. It's all with the scholars. The scholars have this information. And unless people get up on the internet, which they can do if they choose to spend the time, or in some other way they're taught these things, they don't know these things.
Right, because this is not common knowledge. I mean, it's not the first time I've heard about it. I've heard kind of on the periphery over the years since I've been studying the scriptures and studying what has happened historically between Christianity and Judaism. But no, it's not easily accessible. So unless you even know that it's out there, no one would even think to Google it.
Right, right, exactly, right. So, the question is, we're living in a modern age, okay? The question comes to mind, or should come to mind, why can't the people of the three monotheistic religions live in peace? And I'm speaking of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Okay, what are we lacking? What are the people lacking? They're lacking being taught tolerance for the views of others, or they don't even know that there are these people who have other views and they should be allowed to live, they
Well,
should be allowed to.
so here's my question. How do you teach tolerance when you have a religion that has a manifesto that talks about killing Jews and Christians because, either they convert to Islam or they die? I mean, Christianity doesn't teach that. Judaism doesn't teach that. I mean, although Christianity has been ruthless to the Jews throughout centuries. Um, but how do you achieve that goal? I mean, we're just watching President Trump coming back from the Middle East, and here he's negotiating with terrorists who one of them just recently killed a bunch of Christians. So you've got the head of ISIS, and also he was formerly with Al Qaeda. Then you have Qatar, who is the biggest funder and terrorist hosts. It's just it sounds like a really nice thing, but how do we achieve that goal? I would love to know the answer, Yaffah, because this is we live in a very strange time, and we certainly have our challenges ahead in trying to bring us together. I mean, I applaud even our president for doing what he's doing and trying to make that peace happen using using economics. But I guess studying this for so long has given me a negative feeling toward really actually having peace. But again, for me and what we do at PJTN, I believe that there can be peace between at least Judaism and Christianity if we can just reach Christians and educate them about what the Bible does say. Because I do believe most Christians don't want to come down on the wrong side of God. They want to do the right thing, but they just don't know because their pastors or their priests are not teaching these truths from the pulpit.
The thing is this, if we want to have peace across the three monotheistic religions, we have to do what in the business world we call it the same thing, culture change, changing the culture. And the culture that we have right now in what's called Western civilization goes back to the Greco-Roman period, okay, of the empire, of the Roman Empire, and the church fathers. And as you know, they're deciding that the Jews have no longer a place in God's plans and purposes and divine plan and whatever, and all of that stuff that they put out and all the changes that they made, which we can talk more about some of the other changes later. So the way we do it in the business world is three ways. We can do it top down, we can do it bottom up, and we can do it middle up and middle down. Okay? So it takes a lot of people to be involved in this at whatever level they're at. Now, in the Roman Catholic Church, for example, it would be top down. It would come down from the Pope. Okay? That the Roman Catholic Church is really going to get involved in fighting this anti-Semitism. It's not correct, it's not proper, blah, blah, blah. Whatever they want to say, whatever programs they want to put together, I mean, it's going to take that in the Roman Catholic world. In the non-Roman Catholic world, some of the other Christian groups in Protestantism, okay, it would take the leaders of those groups. But then we can also do it bottom up, and it needs to be happening in the schools as well, and people get on their boards of the school system and fight for correct teaching, which I know you're very much involved with that. So, and then you can do it middle in, or you could say middle up and middle down and try to influence people. We need to influence people about this anti-Semitism. And if somebody is a public figure, for example, if somebody's a public figure doing this, they need to be called on it.
Right.
And they need to be called on it, maybe using Matthew's process of first you go to your brother one-on-one, as you know, then you go to your brother. If that doesn't work, because you do that first privately, and then you go to your brother with 2 or 3 witnesses at the second stage of trying to influence their behavior now, their conduct and behavior, whatever is wrong
Right.
or inappropriate, whatever, and then finally you go public. I mean, people need to be called on their anti-Semitic verbiage, rhetoric, behavior, whatever it is they're doing. And more people need to do that and take the risks associated with doing that, because it is risky.
Right. Yes. Good point. And I can think of a couple people right now, which I won't mention on this, but as we're wrapping up the show, we're going to have you come back, and we're going to have to continue this conversation. But Yaffah, what would you like to leave with our audience before we close today? And, how can our audience help you? You're doing amazing work. This is groundbreaking what you're doing, teaching Christians and Jews about this history, which we know very little about. We know about the past and the anti-Semitism that has been so pervasive within Christianity. But what you're sharing with us here is something most people are not aware of. How can people get involved, learn more about what you're doing? How can they help?
Well, here's the thing. We, as you know, get very little help and support for the work that we're trying to help the B'nai Nusim who are trying to come back to Am Israel, to the people of Israel, recognized as Jews. They're doing what they can, and we're doing what we can to help them with sending rabbis, Beit Din, to give them that confirmation of their Jewish identity so they would be accepted. But everything costs money, as you know. So what people could do if they want to, and I want to remind your audience, which I'm sure probably most of them know, even Paul, within the Gentile Christian groups that he was working with, collected money for the poor Jews in Jerusalem
Mm-hmm.
and brought those donations, to the elders in the Nazarene sect, which is what they were called in the Jewish world. And so what people could do with PJTN, is to give what's called targeted donations. Now, according to the laws of the United States nonprofits, if someone gives a donation, doesn't say anything about how to use the money, then that organization can use it in whatever way they desire.
Mm-hmm.
But if they give a donation and they specify, I'd like to support this project or that project, or for example, your film that you want to do on the Inquisition, or whatever it happens to be, then under the law of the United States for a 501c3, you, me, I have a 501c3 as well in the United States, are required to use that money in that way and required to be able to prove it with our accounting records.
Absolutely.
So, right. So that's what people could do. And it wouldn't take a lot of money from each individual, because right now we're only in debt to about $5,000 for what we're doing in Lima, Peru right now. So it's not a lot of money, but if quite a few people gave even just a little bit, that could be handled, in a flash, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to just encourage our audience. Thank you, Batya. I want to encourage our audience that if you feel led to give, I want to encourage you to make a donation to PJTN. You can go to the website at pjtn.org, make a donation, and just earmark that donation for Ezra. That's Ezra L'Anousim, capital L, apostrophe, capital Anousim. Again, it's Ezra, Ezra, L'Anousim, capital L, apostrophe, capital Anousim. And we will get those donations to Batya to help her in her groundbreaking work. This is so important, ladies and gentlemen. We are living in the last days. God promised Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and their descendants that he would bring them, although they would be scattered in the nations, one day he's going to bring them back to their land. And this is what we are trying to accomplish at Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, is to educate Christians about their biblical duty to stand with Israel and the Jewish people against the rise of anti-Semitism, but also to remind Christians that we are biblically required to help Brother Judah, to stand with them, to help them make their way back home. And that's why this documentary that we've been working on, that Batya just acknowledged, the film is to try to reach more Hispanics, Latinos who come from a background similar to my background, where they were raised Catholic, but their family were actually Jews. So this is a way for us to partake and partner with God at this historic time in history. And you can do your part, ladies and gentlemen. So go to pjtn.org. I hope you all found this program informative. We're going to post this podcast on our website and all of our podcast platforms so that you can share with your family and friends. As PJTN Watchmen, we have a biblical mandate to stand against the ungodly rising Nazi threat that is destroying this nation and other Western nations, threatening our Judeo-Christian values and promoting anti-Semitism. We cannot remain silent. God warned the prophet Ezekiel about the responsibility of the watchman. We have a duty, ladies and gentlemen. You are being informed. You are a watchman standing guard, watching for the enemy advancing. You can sound the alarm and warn others by just simply sharing this podcast with your family and friends. So please share and like and help sound the alarm in your community. You know, Dietrich Bonhoeffer reminded us, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. Don't forget to join us for next week's podcast as we continue our conversation about combating the rise of anti-Semitism and taking back local control of our communities and our children's education. I want to also remind you that if you have not signed up to become a PJTN Watchman, you can help support this mission through our award